This comes from supporter Janai Shields. Jimmy, one of the primary empirical data points that grand biological theories attempt to explain is the diversity of life. Both young Earth creationists and evolutionists via natural selection have explanations for this, but does evolution have any evidence in its favor besides one, similarity in the genetics of different species, which both can explain, and two, the testimony of biologists, most of whom are not theologically and biblically trained?
Well, there's a problem that we have today in fields of research in general. I was tempted to use the German word, and I had to think of how can I say this in English. In fields of research, there's a problem that they're so massive these days that it's very rare to have a person with true expertise in more than one discipline. So, biologists tend not to be theologians and vice versa, and we just have to kind of muddle through that situation as best we can. That's part of the answer I wanted to give. Could you repeat the question, Matt?
Oh dear. Let's see if I can find it. 1 second here.
I think to summarize it, is there other good reasons to believe in evolution?
Other than those two?
The original.
Right. Okay, well, one of the primary empirical data points that grand biological theories attempt to explain is the diversity of life. Both YEC and evolution via natural selection have explanations for this, but does evolution have any evidence in its favor besides one, similarity in the genetic she may have misspelled something here, of different species, which both can explain, and two, the testimony of biologists, most of whom are not theologically and biblically trained?
Well, it's going to depend on...
Here's what she meant. Sorry, she corrected herself. So one, similarity in the genetic code of different species. That was the first point. And then the second was
Yeah, so there are both similarities and differences in the genetic codes of different species. And both of those, now I was using a deliberately simplified argument today because I don't want to go over the heads of people. But there are other things in our genetic code that reflect the history of our species, and you can show and other species, and you can show how they're interrelated on a genetic level by both similarities and differences. And you find not only things like the VIT genes for producing egg yolks that humans carry, you also find other things like records of past infections. There are ancient viruses that got incorporated into our genetic code, and you can establish a map of how these different elements in the genomes of different organisms have interacted with each other over time. And then you can figure out how long ago it happened, because today we can measure the rate of genetic mutation in different species. Because of our ability to sequence individual genomes, you can look at the genome of a parent organism and its immediate offspring and measure the exact number of mutations that have occurred. And this applies whether it's a human or a mouse or whatever it may be. It turns out that bigger, longer-lived organisms like us have a slower rate of mutation because we have longer generations. It's longer before we reproduce. But little bitty things like mice that have really fast metabolisms and live fast and die young and reproduce young have a much higher rate of mutation because they're cycling through their generations faster. And so you can then look at the information of genetic similarity and difference and calculate based on the rate of mutation that species had, how long ago it must have diverged from a related species. And when you do that, you get numbers in the millions of years frequently, not just, they don't all converge at 6,000 or 7,000 or 8,000.
Okay, Gideon?
Yeah, so maybe on this point I can bring up what I think to be a very significant problem with evolution, which I would argue from a philosophical perspective, evolution is impossible because of the distinction between substance and accident. And this is something that's not taken into account by scientists anymore because they're no longer philosophically trained, right? That what we're seeing, evolution basically advocates that there's only small changes of a few traits, a few genes from a parent to a child. This change is only accidental. That means we're saying it's only changing things about the thing. It's not changing what it is. But it's proposing that if we add up those small changes and accidents from one to another, that eventually we will end up with a totally different species. Something that has a different nature than what came before, a different essence. And I would say that this creates a significant problem for our understanding of substance and accidents. If the addition of lots of accidents can change what something substance is, because it's fundamentally denying that the substance exists. And if substance and accidents doesn't exist, then our teaching on the Eucharist makes no sense.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought about the video.